Today I'm joined here by Dennis. He is a fellow UX designer here at SupplyPike. He's been here for about four years. Okay, good. I got that right. He's told me a lot about UX design in general and just about design systems, how to upkeep them. And he's also taught me a lot about coding, how to understand code, and how to design better for our developers in-house.
Awesome. Yeah, and Ashlyn, you've been here
About 8 months.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's been great because you brought in a lot of this empathy and sensitivity to our UX team that, it's not just for our users, but it's for like everyone at work who's also like building stuff for our users. They're in turn our users too. So yeah.
Awesome. So when we sat down to kind of talk about this talk today, we wanted to kind of go over what UX design means to us. And it really just came down to empathy. Like it can be really hard, but it's important to be able to step into our users' shoes to be able to create great products for everyone. And really, UX design is all about creating, solving problems through empathy. And I really liked this quote. I wanted to include it for today. No product is an island. A product is more than the product. It is a cohesive, integrative set of experiences from first usage to help, service, and maintenance. Make them all work together seamlessly. And UX is really the whole product journey from before a customer discovers the product to its end goal and end of life cycle.
Cool. And kind of just like to break down kind of these tenets we have for when we're thinking about UX as a whole and what like a good experiences was. I've kind of looked at some older creatives and architects and designers in the past, and Vitruvius, he's a Roman architect, kind of first century BC. He was really known for like kind of setting up the stage for architecture. And there's these three kind of main ideas and goals that architecture wants to accomplish. And that's Venustus, Utilitas, and Firmitas. These aren't moons. They're just some Latin we can learn. And what those stand for is form, function, and delight. Basically, does the building we're building or the product we're building, is its form right? Are we using TypeScript? Are we using Rails? Are we using, stucco for this house? Is it built with wood? Is it built out of steel? The function, how well does this function? Like, does it do its job? If I build a really big factory at scale, does it do its job? And then there's one thing that sometimes we miss, and that's delight. Do you feel good when you walk into this building? Does it inspire you? Does it like make you feel fine, or does it make you kind of mad? And so that's kind of good UX. And let's kind of look at what bad UX could be. Number one, it's noticeable. If you notice something's wrong with your process or like notice something's off, like it's already bad design. Bad design can be complacent. It can be inefficient. It doesn't innovate over time, so it gets stale, it falls behind. It sets big barriers, especially in the world of accessibility, ADA, all that kind of stuff. And then, it could be disjointed. Maybe you have a family of products and some of the products like don't talk to each other, or maybe the tools don't interface very well with each other.
Yeah, so if you kind of think about UX as a solar system, it really touches every aspect of the product journey. It ensures that the entire product has been thought through from all angles possible. Like, are you solving a problem that actually needs to be solved? That's kind of where user research comes in. And are users staying engaged with your product? That's why content and design really matters. And it's important for all of these to work together to create really cohesive products and experiences for our users. And now that we've talked a little bit about what good and bad UX looks like, Dennis is going to walk us through how humans have innovated the way that we communicate with each other.
Yeah, so we've kind of taken this, generic, UX, kind of UI. A lot of tech folks here probably, oh, we're going to talk about software, UI design and whatnot. But let's take like a huge step back and kind of look at humanity as a whole. And we'll see how we kind of figured out like why things were bad and how we made them better. So at the very start of whatever, all we had was oral communication, right? And, that doesn't go so well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was a way for us to communicate. Like, haven't you played telephone at school?
Yeah, it never goes good.
who in chat was the kid that decided just to change the words for fun, right? And then who was the kid in chat who didn't hear what the last person said?
What were you?
I was not going to mess up, so I definitely said what was said. And so to me, it's kind of crazy because you have to think like there were some humans at some point who couldn't communicate. That's a problem. And what makes me my mind blow is like some dudes had to agree on how to agree, but they didn't have the words to agree.
Mhm.
They kind of had to figure that out. So like, how did we start doing that? Well, I don't know. We just started talking. We started figuring out somehow agreeing on things, and then eventually humans came up with language, and then eventually, finally, we got written language. Shout out to the, Phoenicians, cuneiform, all that. But okay, so maybe we solved this problem of being able to communicate it. That's fine. But what happens if you don't speak my language?
Yeah.
What happens if, how am I supposed to get my word to you? I don't know. And so written language was kind of that like next step of automation. Okay, well, we can talk, we can like remember, but like, how do we preserve these thoughts, these stories in time? Like, how do we get to this presentation where we're talking about this later? Well, written language was kind of that next step, right? And again, if we look at the problems that brings forth, solves a big group problem, but now my group and your group can interface.
Yeah.
And so there was this problem, translation became a thing, and a lot of that stems all from oral communication again, help translate the language, kind of what TJ was talking about, helping break down dichotomy of what language is. Kind of interesting, a lot of the human languages all have subjects, verbs, kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool that we can have this system together as a whole. So cool. What happens when I'm tired of writing my monastery books as a monk in the 14th century over and over? Well, thankfully, Johannes Gutenberg gave us the printing press. And this is where we really started automating like the spread of knowledge, right? A guy in a monastery is not just writing these books by hand to copy paste. We're just making a machine that can copy paste this. So this is kind of cool. We can now preserve history in mass. It's a lot faster for some guys to run a press than some guy is writing the same book over and over. And so like this started automating story, news, propaganda, for better or for worse. And like, this was like the next big step. And so we're going to fast forward a lot.
Just
right?
a little.
Well, if we automated information making, how do we just automate information as general as humans? Well, back in ARPA and the early internet days of like, 56K and DSL, we finally started realizing like, why don't we just have servers everywhere and have the whole internet connect through the whole world? That's a pretty cool way of scaling, but what are the problems that came through that? Well, infrastructure, technology need. So there was that awkward area of the internet, and then we had the information boom, the dot-com bubble. And now, since basically, with Internet Archive, Wikipedia, YouTube, everything, we're kind of at mass automation of information. Like, you can go find out whatever you want. I can go ask Google right now. Everyone's phones are listening. That, I want to find something out, I can. So like, what's next? If like we figured out all of automating information at scale, well, we're back at storytelling. Just a full loop. Humans can't get away from the storytelling. And so now we've tried to innovate the nice side, right? We got the logistics down, we got the technology down, we have the infrastructure sort of down. And now like, what's next? Well, back to experience design, right? Like all we have as humans is our journey and our stories. And so you got Twitter, you got, TikTok, Spotify podcasts, Audible books. You can go like find out any kind of story now without any problem. Before, I might have to go to the shaman, ask if he'll tell me a story. He might tell me one. Who knows? Will it be accurate? I don't know. And so, what are the problems now? Well, we kind of know how social media can be. We can kind of see how opinions have gotten automated at mass scale. And so now back to humans again, we have to be the ones that are going to filter what the good and bad is because it's all here. Yeah. And so I think next is Ashlyn. So I guess we figured out how to tell stories and stuff, but how do we travel the world?
Yeah. Right. So let's go back and talk about astronomy a little bit. Humanity wasn't just inspired by the beauty of the sky, but followed the changes in the sky over the ages and guided the sky for its activities like agriculture and shipping. And in addition to being inspired by its beauty, the sky continues to serve as a guide to mankind today. Our ancestors used the sky to improve their everyday lives, but I guess this doesn't really work under every condition. So how could this be improved? And that's where we kind of come to the compass. And The invention of the compass made it possible to determine heading from when the sky was overcast or foggy and when landmarks were not in sight. And this enabled people to be able to navigate farther from land, increasing sea trade and contributing to the age of discovery. And this product was just created really well because it fits in your pocket and it'll work under any conditions except maybe near the poles, which I hope if you find yourself there, you're a little bit more prepared. So as we're kind of walking through wayfinding and navigating, we now kind of are entering the technology era. Although some people today might be using compasses, in the late 1900s, people began using GPS to get around. It uses position and time information from satellites circling Earth to provide directions. Wayfinding now is not only just a device in your pocket. You're not limited to navigating what's just close to you, but now you can find anything that you really need, no matter the distance. And it's made traveling a lot easier. Like, do you need a hospital, schools, restaurants, shops, really anything that comes to mind is now easily navigable. And when I think about all of the innovations of the past, GPS might be my favorite one because I am really directionally challenged and I really love to explore new places, which kind of brings us to now. We've gone from wayfinding for necessity now just for fun. We're trip planning rather than destination finding, and we have more of a focus on the journey rather than the end goal. And companies like Airbnb are really betting big on trip planning and experience factoring rather than automating just finding a place to stay. So yeah, we're now going to talk a little bit about how humans are innovating for the future and what that's maybe going to look like.
Yeah. Sweet. So some necessities of communicating and wayfinding, we find ourselves all over the world, but what's next, right? There's a lot of things that could be important right now. Right. We're kind of locked into our world, and if anyone knows a little bit about Fermi paradox, thank you, and exploring the cosmos, we'll know that, like, you know, there's a lot to go. There's oh, you're good. Yeah, sweet. So, all right, space, the final frontier, right? It's been an awesome few years of space innovation. We've had the James Webb's Space Telescope, which has given us some of these beautiful images.
Oh, yes.
And not only that, like the beauty of the images and the art are all inspiring, but the physicists in the chat all know that, like, us being able to peer further back in time in the early universe is actually going to prove or disprove a lot of our theories, which, you know, physics theories are very much theoretical a lot of the time, but they are based on reality. And what's cool about all that is, like, because we've innovated stuff through space and sometimes through the military, I saw someone drop that in the chat, that, like, the rest of humanity could actually benefit from these things. So, you know, space, you know, NASA space program, SpaceX finally bringing kind of the private industry into light. It's kind of cool to see that, like, humans are more or less for fun also trying to go. You know, Blue Isle is kind of, I don't know how I feel about Blue Isle. Sometimes I think it's cool that we're pushing space forward at such a level that it's basically consumer and novel, but novelty is usually not the best thing in UX design because it doesn't really scale, but it's usually like an indication of scale, right? So if we look back at the Bugatti Veyron, if anyone knows about that car, it's a pretty bad car in general in terms of, like, form and function, but it was a technological marvel that we were able to put, like, that much horsepower into a car and beat records. And so it's kind of, with a grain of salt, Blue Isle sending, you know, rich people in space is kind of annoying to us people on Earth that we have our problems, but it is pushing the industry. And so exploring the cosmos has been great. It's one of my favorite personal things, space, physics. Well, so if we've explored and innovated the way we kind of see our physical reality, what about exploring reality? Oh my God. The final revision 2 frontier, right? So early humans, if we go back to what we were talking about with oral communication and then written language, we had fiction. We had fiction all throughout time, and that was a way for humans to escape reality, you know, through our oral stories that we passed down, through books, through fiction. Well, nowadays we have all this technology at scale. Netflix can put me into any situation I want. Hulu has a bunch of videos. You have things like Soundscapes, Meta, VR, and Vive all trying to go heavy into the VR space. And anyone knowing Fermi paradox stuff, do we explore a cosmos, or do we get so technologically advanced we just put ourselves in simulations in the future, right? And then my favorite bit, video games with the little Sims call out.
Oh yeah, I know that's your favorite.
Right. And so it's kind of cool to see how, it's not only just our physical space, but also our actual reality that we want to escape from. Humans get bored. And so now we got meta. And if anyone got that meta joke, shout out. We're going to get even more meta. But how do we innovate? Well, good segue to Gasher's talk in a few weeks, where he'll talk about consciousness. And, machine learning, AI, data science, all that kind of stuff is things we are innovating the way we innovate, right? If we can figure out problems and let a bunch of computers do the math, we can get insights faster. But the problem with that is, we found that out a little bit in supply chain, is like, it's a little hard to put human intuition to data that seems in a closed system, even though it's ML, right? So there's a joke that it's still an if statement, just really long, right? And so we still have to put human intuition into the right models and right everything. So there's that awesome, human thing again, where we solve something cool at scale, but it brought in a lot of awesome problems, right?
Yeah.
And I call them awesome because, like, why not? Everything's terrible, right? Let's go back. Oral tradition. I couldn't even agree with you because there was no words to agree.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then we somehow wrote some stuff in the dirt and it all kind of spiraled from there. I couldn't navigate the planet, so I decided to look at the sky, and I got tired of that. I made a compass. We got tired of that. We need GPS at scale. But, I can't have GPS if I don't have a phone. So there's accessibility problems. This is kind of what's cool about humans, is like, we were talking on why did someone just decide to make language? Why did someone say, I'm tired of looking at the sky and it's sunny and cloudy one day, I can't do it? Well, I think it's because we just get bored, or we want things to be better. Something's just in our DNA that we always want to innovate. Sorry. Right.
Yeah, it's really no shortage of problems out there, and the list of challenges that are coming up is getting longer. And instead of letting that scare you or hinder you, let it motivate you to go out there and really do some problem solving.
Yeah, and then, if everything's so terrible, especially right now, inflation, recession's on the rise, we're all worried about what the future has for us. Like, we just got to remember that, like, recessions are builders markets. There's some examples like GE, GM, IBM, Disney, Microsoft. They all kind of started at really awful economic times, and they made it. And what's cool is, like, they made it, but they also were solving a problem no one were. And so they double benefited from us, kind of lifts us all up out of this. And so you got to think of, like, the most innovative times of, humanity: digital age, agricultural revolution, industrial revolution. They were all, like, really big moments in time that kind of, like, at scale helped us be better.
Yeah.
And so our shout out to you guys is probably, think of something right now that you don't like, and why not innovate something to make it better?
Yeah.
Wow.
Ta-da.
All right.
Questions?
Good talk. Thoughts, questions in the audience?
There has to be aliens somewhere, right? Deuce, I look at the JWST images, and how can there not, honestly?
They're out there somewhere.
And then, what's the greatest human invention? Maybe the blurst, the best and worst, is probably the smartphone, because it's put all these at scale innovations in the palm of your hand, right? And we've all heard the podcast talking about what's the next step between cybernetics. When is my phone just in my hand?
At all times.
I mean, my phone's in my hand at all times anyway.
Yeah, pretty much. I can never escape mine, but
right.
Do you think innovation looks cool or useful only because it's invented by humans? Or do you think as long as it solves a problem, it's still a good invention? I'm coming at from, like, all the great stuff this OpenAI is doing, right? DALL-E, for example, it can generate whatever the art you want now. I think they even have a project called Jukebox where it invents music.
Yeah, we messed with that.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's bad. and good.
Visual Studio has what, the Copilot thing?
Hmm.
Are they human inventions or are they computer inventions?
Well, I mean, it's
The-
like,
the result of DALL-E 2. Is that art or is the tool itself the art?
in a lawful way, I mean, copyright, it's the no one's, right? An implementation, we might be using a fake profile photo. But yeah, that goes back to, I don't know, what's consciousness, right? Maybe Matt Gashler will answer that, because like I said earlier, like even if it's an ML or an AI thing, like we still have to guide it. And you go read Dolly's kind of white paper about it, and the guy has to warn you, it's like it's fed off the internet. So it's kind of more of a resonance of what the internet is being filtered through, making cool images and whatnot. And so again, the sample and kind of the ecosystem is still small and still human controlled. So I don't know.
Maybe that's what they want you to believe.
Right.
I think Omar is asking which app is our favorite when it comes to UX.
Ooh, one that's well designed too. I want to say 2016 Spotify.
I wouldn't say Spotify.
Yeah, I for personal reasons, I like Tobias Schneider. He was their main UI UX person that did the whole green branding. But what I really liked was, especially with Pandora and SoundCloud and YouTube at that time, back in like 2015, 16, there was like no curation that I liked. Like Pandora, I'm hammering that skip button.
Yeah.
Spotify was like, here's 6 personalized sort of you albums, but split into little genres. So I can pick my energy for the morning. It's stuff like that, like really that curates what you like to experience is what I like. So yeah,
they also just give you the opportunity to just do whatever you want on Spotify too. It's really like adaptable to each person. So I would say Spotify too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jamming out.
Okay, Google Maps is probably the best.
Yeah.
There's so much you can do in Google Maps. It's not just navigation anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's like reviews, pictures, different types of places. And to bundle all of those into one app, to me, that requires real.
Yeah, I probably open up Google Maps at least 10 times a day, probably.
And how many that is to navigate?
Not every time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's my second best design app, because yeah, like you said, there's just so much to do. Like even on the logistics side, you could do polyfill sizing and get area sizing maps, on the fly, like all the solar utilities that use Google Maps utility to tell you how much your house will make in solar. That's all built off of Google Maps. And so to me, I like to think like the product is great, the offering is great, but also the developer side, for better or for worse, is really good, because it takes a lot of AI or API stuff and integrations to handle sizing of property on Google Maps. But the API integrations is so cool. So yeah.
I think you'll like
Ahmed.
Yeah.
All right. Can you give an example of the best and worst or possibly stagnant design elements in video games?
That's all you.
The best. Oh, Ahmed, this is a tough one. So I can give you the worst. The worst is microtransactions. Okay. Everyone knows what those are.
You're shutting down an idea before it became popular.
Yes. Because implementation gets greedy, right? Microtransactions, like if it helps me with aesthetic and stuff, is better. But if it becomes pay to win, that's when the game starts suffering. The people who don't pay to win suffer, because they can't compete with someone who has $30,000 in a video game. Funny example, I play a small MMO, and there's a guy who spent 30 grand on it.
Oh,
but he's kind of ruined our server because he's set up rules that are for him, obviously not for the rest of us free-to-play players. So very interesting. Yeah, Ahmed, EA. EA went from making video games to selling them, and so the quality went down. But I'm just rambling now. The best one in video games, man, I would say storytelling. The unhidden, the unknown feature in all good video games is there's some story element to it, right?
You should ask this question. I think it's really good. How can innovation of the masses combat the limitless greed of the rich and the powerful? Are there examples also in the history that has sort of helped?
I mean, French Revolution, right? That was easy. They were all in a state-sized country and could just go to the capital and do their thing.
Mhm.
Now we have this issue of like I said, we're back to social media. Everyone has a platform.
Mhm.
Everyone, you just sign up for free. You have a platform to talk and contribute to your opinions and ecosystems. So somewhere because we have scale and communication at mass, like that's somewhere in that realm, crowdsourcing or something. But to me, if anything's going to be better, it has to be systematic and default. Otherwise, some people in general won't go out and do that, if that makes sense. Like if it's there, like a 401k, and someone just signs me up, I'll do it. But a lot of people won't sign up for a 401k if you give them the choice, right? So I think there's a lot of choice to do that right now. It's hard because of how wide and big social media or those things are. What are you going to do? Get 7 billion people together? It's really hard to do that, right?
Mm.
And so maybe there's some innovation where there's more succinct talking and stuff at scale. But right now it's, you said, we scale great. And now we have this problem where like, we're so disjointed because every opinion is one-to-one with the person now.
I think I don't know what exactly greed and rich and powerful means, but I think like just like 20 years ago, right, there was so much stuff accessible to only certain types of people. Think of stuff like, I don't know, like really expensive rentals or houses or islands or I don't know, yachts, right? Even stuff like, I don't know, getting access to the stock market, you have to go through somebody, you have to know somebody. But think of all the stuff happened in the past 20 years. You can get any real luxury property through Airbnb, or you can get an yacht or boat rental through an app, or Uber even had like what chopper or helicopter rentals back then. Robinhood fixed the whole thing. So now like I think the playing field is becoming even and even as long as people recognize the retail market wants something that I don't know certain people had in the past. Twitter is obviously one of those things. Like, okay, now everybody actually has an opinion. You can't just go bribe a politician. Instead, I don't know, maybe you can do well, not a good example, but what's a thing? Cancel culture. Somehow became a thing. So now you have to actually watch for your behaviors. So I think we're making good progress. But as long as we can make stuff like voting and stuff like that more accessible, maybe that's like the next great thing for moving things forward.
Right. And that goes back to my idea that we should always be thinking of like these passively pushing us defaults. Like it should be innovating by default. It shouldn't be like, cool, we made something, just let it milk itself. It's just going to get complacent, right? And then, what you said about Robinhood was great. Like all the retail traders could come in mass and do something crazy. Like look at GameStop. I mean, like for better or for worse, like that really just proved the point that the retailer traders were tired of not being able to have the same options. So here we are. Stuff like that, Deuce. Thank you. Any more?
I'm trying to read what Steven said.
Oh yeah, I can't see it.
Sorry, my eyes don't work well. It's just another innovation would be nice for us to fix. What if my contacts fell out? I mean, we have LASIK, but that's expensive, not so accessible, right?
Yeah, one day will be better.
But it was better than 10 years ago. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Cheaper and better. Okay, we need a sort of a station of data box.
Isn't that the whole point of this Twitter versus Elon argument? You can't actually tell what's a bot, what's not. Even if you think you can do this, you have no idea who's somebody behind the Twitter profile is a GPT-3 or somebody real or somebody trolling.
Or an intern for that person, right?
Yeah.
The transparency is kind of interesting. That's why I think some of the utility from the blockchain could be good because there's always a paper trail from the system as default, right? Yeah, Ben, those are glasses. I think you re-innovated something.
Let's see. Do you think we're mostly solving social problems going forward, or will there still be room to solve real I don't know. Well, I get think about this question more. I forget what it's about.
See, Google kind of does PageRank, how many people, but it's strongly affected by. Yeah, that's a good point, Stephen Lynch. This is kind of why everyone gets weary of looking at Amazon reviews. It's like,
Yeah.
if I see something with like 4,000, 4.5 stars, I might not believe it as much as 35 stars and 2, 3 stars, right? I
Mhm.
start really thinking like, someone either really likes or really hates this to come here and do extra work for Amazon, right? I don't like, I've already bought, I gave you some money, I bought from you. I don't really want to give you any more of my time unless I was really passionate about it, right?
Mhm.
And so I kind of see what you're saying with the Google stuff, right? It's just like, it's still human driven on rank, or is it? I mean, it might be bots.
Yeah, it's actually really hard to tell who's behind, who's visiting the pages, who's clicking.
Mhm.
It's almost like a pendulum swing with all the innovations. You go too far, and then you make drastic changes, and then you end up on the other side, and then you innovate from there. What is it like? This might be the direction we're going with, like stuff like streaming services. Where now, before we hated cable because there wasn't as much, choice. But now everybody has their own streaming service. Now somebody wants to bundle it back. Once somebody bundles it, I'm sure there's going to be like another unbundling.
Yeah, there's almost too many streaming services.
Yeah,
now.
we went from one package to a la carte, but you have to get all of it.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying.
Like Google was like that too, right? They started with because you couldn't index the internet, but now all the bots and SEO farms are dominating the first page. Now Google is about to make some drastic changes to make sure they're
All a cart.
Mhm.
yeah.
All a carts. Yeah.
Thank you, Nicole. Stephen Lynch, that's right. All a cart. Analysis paralysis is what we call it. There's too many choices, so you just end up getting them all.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, guys. You guys have the contacts if you need them. Well, thank you. A reminder of another event. If you haven't filled out the survey, sorry. If you haven't filled out the survey, please do, so we know what to expect or how to prepare better. But if you guys have any feedback about the event in general, there was an email earlier, techtalks@supplypike.com. Yeah, feel free to email us. But yeah, if you can do that survey real quick, that'd be great. Otherwise, everybody have a great day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.